Hello everyone. So I'm a big fan of handhelds and the Nintendo Game Boy. I've been collecting cartridges since as long as I can remember. Nothing beats just snapping in an old Game Boy cartridge, you know. So naturally, I couldn't resist grabbing an Analogue Pocket when they became available. Getting a hold of one was an absolute nightmare, but it was all totally worth it in the end. Just seeing some of my old childhood video games in near perfect picture clarity just felt amazing and a little bit unreal. And now we have a bunch of new adapters to use. I don't just have Game Boy, Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance cartridges here. There's Sega Game Gear, Atari Lynx, Geo Pocket Color, and an album of Hue cards. I thought it might be fun to show them all actually working on the Analogue Pockets because, well, nothing beats snapping in a little cartridge. Although I would just be careful with the Game Gear adapter, I did notice you could potentially damage some of the labels on my more worn out cartridges. All of the in-game footage you see in this video is directly captured from the Analogue Pocket connected to the dock, and I thought I could show you some of the original hardware the cartridges were originally designed for. The Pocket did ship with the Game Gear adapter, so perhaps it's best to begin here. There have been all sorts of Game Gear emulators. Many of Sonic's handheld adventures have been re-released in the various Sonic collections over the years. I do think a lot of these games do lose a little something in that transition from tiny old display to near perfect picture quality. Scrolling of the highway stage in Shinobi, it looks far more believable on an actual Game Gear. This stage was mind-blowing to look at in 1991, or the morning mist that sweeps through the town in the opening stage of Legend of Illusion. The cross-hatching on the water sections in Sonic would be blurred and, again, more believable on the Game Gear screen. The Pocket does include a variety of these different filters to recreate a little bit of how I actually remember these games looking in my childhood. It's still not quite perfect, but this is currently the definitive way to actually play Game Gear for me. The Sega Game Gear was a pretty big part of my childhood. I think the Game Boy was undoubtedly far better and the system library was a little lacking. Some of its very best titles didn't even see a release outside of Japan. I'm playing a fan-translated edition of Sylvian Tale here. But as someone who didn't own a Mega Drive, I had to make do with the portable 8-bit editions of Sonic, or Streets of Rage here. This version of the game was heavily scaled back compared to its Mega Drive version. 5 stages instead of 8. Cut one of the 3 playable characters, sorry Adam. The game did at least retain its 2-player mode through a link cable. The music is pretty solid too. For the longest time, all I ever owned for the Game Gear was these 2 games, and a copy of Spider-Man here. I don't think it's that great, but I still loved this game at the time. Spider-Man games sure have come a long way since then. And if you really want to be ridiculous, you could even use the Game Gear Master System adapter on the Pocket, if you fancy playing some of your old Master System cartridges. Very portable. I won't be focusing too much on all of these extra peripherals today, that just feels like its own separate video. Instead, let's move on to the next system and one of my absolute favourites, the Atari Lynx. This is a modified Model 2 unit, so the screen does look a little clearer compared to how it would have originally looked. The Atari Lynx just felt so incredibly ahead of its time. I thought these games looked amazing back then. There were a few select titles for the Lynx that were played in a vertical arcade style tape mode. I don't actually have a copy of Raiden on hand to show you. But I do have a copy of Gauntlet here. It doesn't really add anything to the gameplay, to be honest, and what a strange addition of Gauntlet this is. As great as the Atari Lynx is, it does have very similar issues to the Game Gear. A lack of games, the battery life, and whenever me and my friend actually played on Lynx, we would just plug it into an AC adapter. Kinda defeats the whole purpose of its portability. And its rather bulky size, it's pretty huge. As much as I love the old Atari Lynx, I think a few of these games are held back by the system itself, but now I can play these games on my Analogue Pocket here. The Atari Lynx really captured that vibe of the microcomputer era, even fully supported by prominent British developers such as Psygnosis, with ports of Shadow of the Beast and Lemmings. Even Gremlin Graphics provided a sequel to Switchblade, the original being one of my favourite games on the Atari ST. And I must admit, some of the library does feel a bit janky and dated. I don't really think me or my friends understood how to actually play Electro Cop at the time. Or for example, Zarlaw Mercenary, a decent little shooter. It starts out fairly manageable, but by the second level it becomes this mess of pixels and practically throws everything at you. I think this is a perfect encapsulation of my childhood and the microcomputer era. I was convinced some of these games didn't actually have an ending. But that's not to say there are some excellent titles for the Lynx that are totally worth your time. I very fondly remember the many arcade ports for the system, which were in some cases enhanced specifically for the Lynx. I've already spent a lot of time playing Rampart, it's still one of my favourite games for the system. And there is a dedicated homebrew scene for the Lynx which still goes on today. Wyvern Tales, for example, is Final Fantasy for Atari Lynx, the only role-playing game available for the system. Chip's Challenge is surely the killer app for the Atari Lynx. Sure, it may not have the dazzling scaling effects of many other Lynx titles, but this is an excellent tile-based puzzler. You know, I bought this copy of Chip's Challenge many years ago, opened it up and the manual was all in Japanese with this really charming artwork inside. How cool is that? As much as I love the old Lynx, I must say that the game library really benefits the most from these adapters. It's great being able to play these old games again on a device that actually feels portable, and using save states on some of these games has been incredibly useful. The different filters look great and really capture the feel of the system, although I do think I remember the actual Lynx screen looking a bit more of a letterbox display than this. And next up we have the Neo Geo Pocket Color by SNK. Extremely underrated hardware that competed against the Game Boy Color. And my gosh, that screen is dark. Hold on a moment. There we go, and look at this, the Neo Geo Pocket even gives you a daily horoscope. Well, I wish my money was 5 stars. Anyway, launching in 1998 and sadly being discontinued just 1 year later. And it's a real shame too, as I think it could have been a strong contender to Nintendo's handheld. One of the coolest things about the Neo Geo Pocket Color is the 8-directional micro switch digital D-pad, that clicky stick. Oh, it's so good. It just felt like a portable arcade machine. The stick did feel kind of ill-suited for certain titles. Pac-Man, for example, was originally designed for a joystick that could only move in 4 directions. It's kinda hard to play with a pocket stick, it's easy to find yourself accidentally moving in the wrong direction. Copies of Pac-Man did include 2 of these small plastic rings which you could use to lock the stick in place. My 2 main criticisms against the Pocket Color were the screen, it's pretty bad, although to be fair, its competitor, the Game Boy Color, is somehow even worse. So with the Analogue Pocket, it's nice to actually see these games. My other main criticism was, there are a lot of fighting games available for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. The genre of games I'm not really interested in, to be honest, so its library is kinda limited to me. But that's not to say I didn't have a few favourites. I spent a lot of time playing Puzzle Bobble here.
Metal Slug, second mission.
Metal Slug First and Second Mission are heavily scaled back compared to their arcade counterparts, but they are both solid action run and guns. Sonic Pocket Adventure is sort of a weird remake of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from the Mega Drive, and developed by Dimps, who would later go on to work on the Sonic Advance trilogy for the Game Boy Advance. I think I actually prefer playing it with a D-pad here. There are a lot of fighting games available for the Pocket Color, and I did always like how much more simplified they played on the system. If I could pick a favourite, it would probably be SNK vs Capcom, which had a wealth of single-player content available. I remember spending hours on this game. And here's a good game to show off the filters. Dark Arms Beastbuster, an action role-playing title. The monochrome effect really gives it a lot of atmosphere here. I was really hoping to show off a little bit of Neo Turf Masters, one of the very few golf games I actually kind of enjoy, but sadly it seems as though there's some compatibility issues with the adapters. Analogue are normally quite good at updating their firmware. Much like my Game Boy Color cartridges, the Neo Geo Pocket Color looks especially good on that pocket screen with the filters enabled. The only real downside is you will be missing out on that clicky stick if you're not playing on the actual original hardware. And I've saved the best for last. The PC Engine GT, also known as the Turbo Express. A truly fascinating device that released in 1990 and competed against the Game Boy, the Game Gear and the Atari Lynx. The PC GT is basically a portable edition of NEC's PC Engine home console. It must have been incredible to see this at the time. It's pretty huge, but it's such a cool device to actually hold in your hands. And the turbo buttons are included for all your shooter needs. My system was originally a dead unit, but it has since been repaired and modified with a new screen. And even a rechargeable battery. Fortunately, I can show you some footage of how an original unit would have worked via my friend's working PC GT. Thanks, Enrique. It still looks impressive even in its original state. This must have been a truly incredible device for its time, but sadly it just didn't seem to quite catch on. While the PC Engine itself was massively successful in Japan, it had a very limited release over here in Europe, and I don't think the GT even made it over here. I must confess I was a little late to the party too. My first experience with the PC Engine was the Wii Virtual Console, or playing the Amiga port of the system's mascot character, BC Kid as he was known over here. The system utilises the HuCard media, which just looks so cool and slick compared to all the other cartridges I have here. And more importantly, the games themselves just feel great to jump in and immediately start playing. They slot in very nicely into the adapter here, although as you can see already they kind of just jut out at the top, which is a bit unappealing. It would have been nice to actually see the artwork on display. The Pocket does at least include options for those rapid fire buttons, perfect for playing the many different shooters available in the system. Air Zonk was always one of my favourites. The PC Engine is perhaps best known for its many excellent shooters, but there are still many other genres available. Platformers in particular are my favourite genre, so I am a big fan of the PC Engine trilogy. The second installment is often regarded as the best of the series, but for myself I think I still slightly prefer that original game. It just had a great sense of humour to it. New Adventure Island is surely the purest form of the platformer. There's no gimmicks to get in the way, it's just running, jumping and shooting. I have a lot of fond memories of playing this with my housemates on our Nintendo Wii. Legendary Axe was a lot of fun and surely one of the best games available on the system. A side-scrolling action title that felt a little similar to the likes of Castlevania. And that music is just so good. The sequel does go for a different feel and is far more moodier and atmospheric, but I still quite like it. As much as I like playing HuCards on my Pocket, I think I still enjoy playing them slightly more on my GT. This is a seriously nice piece of kit. I'm very fortunate to own one of these. But then again, the Pocket does feel a little bit more portable. I could go on endlessly about all these games here, but perhaps this is a good place to wrap things up. So are the adapters worth it? If you have the cartridges, then yes, absolutely. It's a shame that Analogue don't sell them individually, but you could always just sell the ones you don't need. I can't help but wonder if we will see even more adapters in future. Perhaps a little appreciation towards the Bandai WonderSwan even. Well, I hope you enjoyed the footage today. I thought it might be fun to show you all the adapters working and just a few examples of the older hardware. If you made it this far in the video, this is where I say thanks ever so much for watching, and I hope I catch you for the next video. Until then, take care.